let's start this over again. Hello everyone and welcome to this night session. Little bit of a different stream today because I want to introduce the big brother to my Quickload template. Released today, at least for Cubase. Studio One is coming soon. The Quickload template with VEPro integration. And I want to do this stream a little bit different than usual because I want to use parts of the stream as like the video manual for the product. So I try my best to explain what it is, what it can do and why I did it, and show how it's set up and how it works. In case you're interested of getting it, there's an intro price anyway on the template. Well, might be a good idea to actually link the shop in the chat, right? So this is the shop, and with a code STREAMBIRD, not early bird, but STREAMBIRD, you can actually get an additional 20% off. So this will only be valuable or eligible for a couple of days for people who catch the video later. So code STREAMBIRD gives another 20% off in case you're interested. So music is a little loud, let's turn that down. And like I said, so it's gonna be a little bit different. Nothing is loaded yet. I will just start loading and showing what it is. So in case you're not familiar with the Quickload template, that was like 1.5 years ago, I introduced that as my solution for anyone who wants to work specifically in the DAW without worrying about routing and creating instances of tracks every time you want to create music. So it's kind of like a basic framework that gets you going right away without worrying about effects and routing and everything. So it's all set up. And over time, I was thinking quite a while, and I got requests over and over for like a VEPro version. And the problem with this is a little bit, well, not a problem, but that you cannot do a template that works for everyone because everyone has different libraries and needs to cultivate the VEPro depending on what libraries are installed. So I just cannot figure out a way how to preload VEPro frames unless I do specific libraries like a VEPro frame for a Cinematic Studio Series or for Spitfire or for Orchestra Tools, you name it. And so I was thinking for quite a while how to do this based on the Quickload approach and integrating VEPro, but I think I finally did it. And let me switch the screen here to here so you can see a little better the main screen. Music can be a bit quieter, we don't need that for now. And there we go. So when you get the product, what is in there is actually 4 different Cubase projects. It's all the same in the end, just different settings. So we have the usual Quickload template that is still existent in case you want to load sounds within Cubase. And we have the add-on VEPro portion. And there are 2 versions, one with virtual mix rack on every channel and one without. And also one with all the channels enabled and one version with the Quickload channels, which are the contact instances within Cubase, disabled. So without further ado, let's just open that up. This is kind of the same way as it happens when you open it on your system the first time. So what you have to do is go to open, and I choose the VMR version and with the Quickload channels disabled. So that takes a little moment because the template is around 500 tracks. And for now, nothing is happening with the sounds. Michael, it's your birthday. Well, happy birthday from my end here. All the best to you. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks for spending your time with us here. Anyone in the chat that has the Quickload template already, then maybe you're familiar with what this is doing. But again, I want to utilize this. Hi, I'm good. Nice to see you. I want to utilize parts of this video as like a video manual to explain what the template is capable of and what you can do with it. So right now I'm loading the Cubase project. First time opening, same way as it would happen on your system when you download the project folder. And it takes a little moment to load for the first time. Should be good in a second. So let's a little music on here. All right. Hey, Michael. So again, I have also to mention that don't worry about my system CPU meters or anything. Streaming at the same time with Cubase running and everything can be a bit taxing on the CPU, so that's why it's taking a little moment. Hey, Flosy. Good to see you. I will not apologize for anyone taking out their wallet. I mean, there's a reason why you create products, huh? Okay, so the template is loaded. This is what it looks like. There's nothing really happening here as of now. And like I said, I have... thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. Yeah, I do like my studio as well. It's very comfy and I enjoy it a lot. So, back to the template. So when you load it up the first time, this is what it looks like. If we take a peek in one of the folders, it is now separated. The Quickload instances that are hosted directly within Cubase and the VEPro channels that are linked to VN Ensemble Pro. We will look at that in a second. So there's a few ways you can run this template overall. And if you have a powerful computer, there's absolutely a possibility to run Cubase and VEPro on the same system side by side. And there are a lot of advantages to utilizing VEPro even with just one computer, namely, or most importantly, that you free up resources for Cubase when VEPro handles the library load. So your CPU meter will be thankful for having instruments outsourced into VEPro. But the main objective for this template is actually if you, for example, utilize a slave system to host your samples. This is where it really starts to shine. So again, you can host it on one system, but it is optimized for utilizing one or several slave systems to host the VEPro frames. And I will talk about that in a second. So let's open up this window. This is my slave system. So this is not my master. This is, I have connected that through remote desktop on Windows. And so let's fire up VN Ensemble Pro here. That's the same step that you would do if you open it for the first time on your system. And it really doesn't matter if you open the VEPro instance on your main computer or like I do here on a slave computer. And the template is also set up in a way that you can utilize several computers. If we look at the content of the project folder, there is a folder called VEPro, and we have one Quickload VEPro full frame. So the whole system uses 5 VN Ensemble Pro instances: strings, brass, woodwinds, percussion, and auxiliary. And the full frame contains all 5 instances. So in my system, for example, I have all the 5 instances sitting on the slave. If you have, for example, 2 slave computers, you could load the strings and brass on one and woodwinds, percussion, auxiliary on the other, or strings, brass on the first computer, woodwinds, percussion on the second, and auxiliary on your main in a separate VEPro instance. How you do that when you open VN Ensemble Pro, if you don't want to load the full frame, you click the little plus here to add a new instance and go to Instance, Open Project. It will tell you that you don't need to save this instance you just created. So you can click No, and then you can select whichever one you want to load. Let's take the strings, for example. So this is the VEPro instance with the strings. And how it works, these are all empty contact instances. This is what I mentioned in the beginning. You have to cultivate this template with your system, with your libraries that you want to use. Since I just mentioned I run all the 5 instances from one slave computer, so I just open up the full frame. So as you can see, it's loading the individual instances, strings, brass, woodwinds, percussion, and auxiliary. So this is the slave. Right now, it is not connected to Cubase. So the first thing that you have to do when you open it up on your end is to open Cubase. Yeah, we have it open already. And open, you see here, the 5 VEPro instances. And right now it's not connected, but I now see the 5 instances that I have opened on my slave system. So, and I can, for example, this is the strings, so I connect it to the strings. Done. Then I take the brass, connect it to the brass. Next, the woodwinds, connect it to the woodwinds. Take the percussion, connect it to the percussion, and then the auxiliary, connect it to aux. That's it. And now, first thing to do is, hey RAM, yeah, I mentioned that before, that you can spread out these instances into separate machines. So and then the first thing obviously is to save the project with the instances loaded and connected. So now let's take a look at what actually is inside. So let me bring back the VEPro instance here. The way I've set it up is that every instance contains 2 folders for pretty much full libraries. For example, Cinematic Studio Strings or Arraya from Audio Imperia. Whatever string library you're working with, it is set up in a way that you have all the different sections like violin 1, violin 2, viola, cello, double basses. And I set it up in a way that you can load 2 different string libraries. So for example, if you work with Cinematic Studio Strings and also like a chamber string library, for example, Spitfire chamber strings, then you can have, obviously everything depends on your computer power and how much RAM you have available. But I have set it up in a way that you can load 2 different string libraries, some ensemble patches and some solo patches. Actually, I just realized that I still have that named ensemble. Should rename that to solo. Update is coming soon. So, and the same with brass. In the brass section, we have first brass library with trumpets, horns, trombones, tuba, low brass. Same thing again. But if you, for example, have a library, say Cinebrass, you have 6 horns, you could load that in the horn section here. And I go about the thought process behind the individual instruments here in a second. So you could have the Cinebrass 6 horns loaded here, and we have another horns area here in the second library where we could put down the 12 horns, for example. And the same thing again, we have brass ensemble and brass solo. And here I also included brass combos because oftentimes, for example, Spitfire Albion and libraries like these have like the high brass section and the low brass section. So this is included in that frame. Then we have the woodwinds, same thing, regular setup, piccolo, flutes, oboes, clarinets, bassoons, repeat. So you have twice the options. ensembles, solo, and combos. Percussion contains orchestral percussion, orchestral tonal percussion, and a few patches of epic percussion. And last but not least, we have the auxiliary, which, and all this can of course be expanded and more made suitable to your needs. We will talk about that in a little bit, how to customize that for your necessities. But this is really like a starting point. This is to get you going. So, and with all these instruments, to explain what the thought process behind it is. Every single instrument that you have in the template links back into Cubase. Of course, that's the main reason behind it. So if we open the string folder here, all this reflects the VEPro frame. So the first string library, if we look at here, we have violins 1 legato, long, short, pizzicato, and special articulation. The thought process here is I want to give as much freedom as possible to treat the individual instruments uniquely in the mixer in Cubase. So you have the possibility to have the legato separated from the longs and the shorts separated from the pizzicato. And for example, special articulation is something where you could put trills or tremolos or other special articulations that your string library provide. So this is reflected here. If we open the first string library folder here, we see the same setup. We have violin legato, long, short, pizzicato, special articulation. Violin 2, legato, long, short, pizzicato, special articulation, etc. This repeats for the second string library, and then we have the ensemble strings and solo strings. And every MIDI channel in this setup corresponds to an individual return channel in Cubase. And everything is set up in a way that the sends are already routed to where they need to be. I have two versions, one where every channel contains an instance of virtual mix rack, but I also have a version without. So where there's no insert plugins loaded from the get-go. So, and you see there's some cryptic behavior in the file names here. We have these little identification, I call them identification marks, because I included some logical editor presets in for the sake of navigation. So when we open all of the folders, I have a quick setup for that to open all the folders, well, most of them. So as you can see, it's quite a lot of channels. And if you have open everything, it can get a little bit tedious to navigate. So what I did is I included the Project Logical Editor presets to navigate through the template. And this is what these identification marks in the beginning of the tracks are for. And I will quickly show you what that means and what it does to the template. So for example, I have now all the folders open. Yeah, that's all. And we have 439 tracks in this template. Hey Scammy, by the way, and thanks for the kind words, appreciate it. So, if we open the logical editor, I included a folder that is called CTO track visibility. And there's a few things in there that you can either run from the logical editor, or you could also create your own key commands for all these individual elements. And this is what I did with my Stream Deck here. I don't know, I think you cannot really see that. Maybe on a big screen. So I have all the visibility commands set up for my Stream Deck. So what I can do here now is to, for example, I just want to see the high strings. Then I hit one button and it shows me just all the high strings. Violins, violas, solo strings, high, ensemble strings, etc. When I say I just want to see the high brass, I just click the button and I see all the high brass that I have. Or just the brass ensembles. Or say I need my Epic percussion. Then I jump to Epic. Or just my keyboards. Or I want to see all strings and brass. Like this. Then I have just strings and brass. So this is all set up in a way that I can. And then I have an all instruments button that brings me back to the default view with all instruments and the folder is closed. So very, very convenient to navigate through the template. But most importantly, right now it doesn't make any sound. So what you have to do, and this is where the kind of the part of the work that I cannot take from you, you need to cultivate your VEPro frame. So like I said, we saved the project with the instances connected. And what I would recommend is to go ahead and save this instance, this full VEPro frame, or the individual instances, depending if you spread them through different systems. I would recommend to resave it under a different name and name it filled, cultivated, whatever. So you know this is the one where you have actually sounds loaded. So let's go ahead how this initially works. Let's say we want to load some strings. I have Jaeger on the top here, so let's do this. I want to use the single patches. Oh, please switch. Sorry for that. Sorry for that. Yes, of course. So going back here, like I said, I would recommend to save as a new project, name cultivated or whatever. And all these in the... Yes, Scammy. These will work with whatever system you have on your end, because all these instances are empty. So you need to cultivate it with your string libraries and save it. And then you have your starting point. So let's say, for example, I have Jaeger and want to utilize Jaeger in this template. Or, I mean, some articulations are missing in Jaeger. Let's take a different string library. Let's take, let's take Cinematic Studio Strings for the sake of checking out. A lot of people have that. So I go into my Cinematic Studio Instruments. And let's load the first file. So I have the legato patch. I just drag my instrument onto it and I can deactivate the other ones here. So just my legato sustain. So I loaded the sustain here. And technically, as you can see, everything is already routed. I mean, that's easy. It's the first channel. So violin legato, and we have the audio signal on the corresponding channel. So let's load the short articulation. Oh, sorry, little doggy needs to go out. Yeah, so again, this template is intended in a way to work on any system. You just need to load the libraries that you have into the framework. So let's say violins, I load the shorts here. And as you can see, I just disable all the other articulations that I don't need. So now I have the shorts on this patch. Going back to Cubase, go to my shorts. And it's not working. What is happening? A little mistake there. I'm gonna fix that and update that as soon as possible. Just so you know, the file naming conventions on all of these are, you can see which instruments is intended to sit there, the MIDI channel of VEPro's 48 options, and the corresponding 1 to 16 MIDI channels. So for example, this is MIDI port 1, channel 1, MIDI port 1, channel 2, MIDI port 1, channel 3, etc. So down here, this is MIDI port 1, MIDI port 8, channel 1. And also I included, because you have also the large view, but I find that sometimes irritating and you have to scroll a lot. So I often use the small view. In case you don't know, this is letter F on VEPro, and included the output channel as well. So you can immediately see also in the small view which is the MIDI channel and which is the output channel. So back to Cubase, we loaded the short strings on channel 3. And when we look at the mixer, so the violin shorts come separately through their own channel. So let's, and by the way, let's turn off the music for now. Quiet. Thank you. So then we have the pizzicato. So let's load the pizzicato here. Again, first violins. We are still on the first violins patch. Then I go to pizzicato and take all the other ones out. So we are on pizzicato on this one. And as you can see, Cinematic Studio Series, for example, has 3 different articulations still on the pizzicato. Usually that is linked to mod wheel, where you can change that. You can, that is a different story, how you set up key switches, etc. So now we have the pizzicato. And again, this is an individual return channel. So we have the shorts and the legato. Last but not least, let's load the longs as well. So I am loading again the violins patch. It should have landed on the above channel. I just left the mouse too early. So you drag it just onto the instrument. Again, just take everything else out. What did I do? Loaded the wrong instrument. This one. Yes. And what happens, because that makes it easy, when you drag the instrument onto an existing one, I have all the MIDI channels preset up here. So it will stay on channel 5 if you change the instrument. That's why I did that with the empty instances. So you don't need to worry about that. So again, here we take everything else out. And on this one, I would just turn off the legato, so we have the sustain patch and can play polyphonically. So we have the legato. And then I can play the longs on this channel. So that's pretty much the whole concept. And the work that you have on your end is to cultivate all these individual patches. Well, you don't have to do all of them, but you can build your first little basic framework. Let's say I want to add an ensemble patch. Let's say we use Spitfire here, Spitfire Albion. I want to use a strings long patch. It says ensemble long, so it makes sense to use an ensemble long patch. So I go to my ensemble strings, long. So there it is, we have the longs. The only downside that we have on this is that the track names are very generic, of course. So nowhere it is said that this is now Cinematic Studio Strings or whatever library you use. There are 2 ways to approach that. The folder is right now called Your String Library 01. You could take this folder and just rename it to CSS. Then you at least know where the string belongs to. If you are more interested in having that on every individual channel, I'm showcasing something that I also explain in the manual. Cubase has fantastic rename functionality. So, for example, when we take all these strings, when we say, okay, I'm going to load CSS into all of these, I go into my project logical editor. I have a preset in naming that is called rename search string. And you see I have these identifiers A and B, which is strings high and strings low. So what I can do, I can type search for A and replace it with A CSS. And the same for B. And immediately I have all the tracks named according to the library that I'm utilizing. So that way you can easily rename your tracks and identify them. If you have a single track like here, you could just add Spitfire Albion 1 string ensemble on, then you know. So let's add, by the way, let's save this as a new version. This is going to be cultivated. All right, let's keep going, add a few more instruments in our VEPro instance. Let's go to the brass, for example, and add an ensemble combo high brass legato. Let's go again with Albion on this one. Individual patches. I think I need the legato patches. Individual, brass, high, octave, legato. So right now, going back to Cubase, now here on VEPro brass, your brass ensembles. I just realized that I'm missing the combo folder here. It should be in the download. Okay, let's do this differently. I messed something up here. Sorry for that. Let's take the brass ensemble. Just for the sake of showcasing what I want to showcase right now. Let's load the individual patches. Brass. Let's load the brass high, because we don't have a full brass ensemble. So here, brass ensemble long. And one more thing to showcase on the solo strings. Let's say I want to add Tina Guo solo legato on the strings. So I go to my VEPro strings, your solo libraries. Let's take the first solo. Tina Guo, let's take the first legato and load that here. Back to Cubase, and I just keep that open for a little bit on top here, so you can see that. If I am already on the MIDI channel, and if I hit, for example, my CC7 button, should be able to see that the volume comes down. This is okay. I gotta check something here. 1204. Damn it. Saving that. I mean, it's a. Yeah, that should be 12. I gotta rewatch the video and we'll update these little errors. It just happens with the amount of work. I've been working on that straight for the past couple of days to finalize it. string low one. And just so you know, all the reverbs, for example, are also set up. So if you want to utilize a string reverb, and this is the advantage of having separate returns for the individual articulations. If you say, okay, I have the violin legato, Daniela, it should work in Nuendo as well. I don't see why not. So I have the legato, and for example, on the shorts, if I say I want to have some delay on the shorts, it only affects the shorts, but not the legato. Because these are individual return channels. Want some reverb on that. So you could have the longs from the strings a little more reverberant than the legato, for example. That's the main important thing about having individual returns. Let's quickly add a few more instruments just to get going a little more quickly. So we add the violins 2 on the longs here, just deactivating everything else that we don't need. And turn off the legato. Let's load the short cello. Again, the usual process, you need to invest a little bit of time. Just load all the individual instruments. That makes life a little easier. So you don't need to, but you don't need to do it right away. You can also start with something and then expand the frame as you go along. So we have the short cellos here. So let's get rid of that. And then we have the spiccato. Okay, back to Cubase. Let's take the CSS shorts. And again, I think it's the same thing that I have to fix that on all the strings. So let's quickly check the viola short. Yeah, it's 2 as well. That should be 3. Again, I will update that after the stream. And you will get, if you have bought it already or intend to buy it before the update is out, you will be automatically notified when the update is up. So actually, let's save that right away. So all right, that's the low cellos there. Little reverb. Then we had the brass. Let's say we want to utilize a legato solo trumpet. Let's go into our frame here. Go to the solo trumpet and let's load. I happen to have Cinematic Studio Brass on here as well. Or maybe let's use, let's use Cinebrass. I don't even know which the latest instrument version is. 1.7 or the instruments. Trumpet, solo, legato. So let's load the Cinebrass, legato, trumpet, solo, legato. And like I said, all the individual return channels have a virtual mix rack applied, or you have, if you don't have that, there's another version without. This is just very convenient for a fast workflow. If you, for example, have the solo trumpet, there was a lot of low-end rumble. You could bring in EQ and just filter out the low end. And this obviously needs a bunch of reverb. And this is routed to the brass reverb. because it's a brass instrument. And that way you could say, let's use some of the ensemble strings. Go back to the beginning. Let's say go on 80. I just want to quickly lay down something because I want to show you the routing, how it's done. So a little bit of strings there. I can also say enlarge this track so I can see it better. And then I'm going down. And this is where the navigation comes in handy. Like, say, I need my high brass, but I don't know where it is. I'm just hitting my high brass button, and then I can immediately jump to it. So then I can go back to all instruments, open just my strings, I go, and my brass. There. So now I have my both my instruments. You were short in the shop and it seems it does not work with Nuendo. How come you say that? Unfortunately, I don't have Nuendo and I can't verify, but I know that Cubase projects should be able to open in Nuendo without any issues. But I can make sure to verify that with a few friends of mine who happen to have Nuendo 11 or Nuendo and can check that. So, in regards to the routing, when we take a quick look at the mixer. So we have the instruments running here. So, and in terms of routing, let's take a quick look at the group tracks. It's a little more extensive than the initial Quickload, because what happens when we have these different libraries. Let's take the example of Cinematic Studio Strings that is coming through here. This is the violins: legato, sustain, short, pizzicato, and special articulations. These all get sent to... Wait a second. Oh, we need to activate that, of course. So the violins get sent to string library violin 1 long and violin 1 short. Then we have violin 2 long, violin 2 short. This is in case you need to render a very separated stem or individual tracks for later mixing, for example. So you can have the violins 1 extra, the violins 2 extra. Then we have the summing tier. This is the main important one if you send stuff off for mixing. Usually that's enough to do that. You have the strings high long, which is violin 1, 2, and viola. Shorts, low longs, low shorts. But for example, imagine you send files off and just reading what Daniela is writing there, real fine, because I have an older version of Cubase, but VEPro 7 works perfect with DaVinci Resolve in my Hackintosh. All right. Does that exclude then the fact that it's working? Not really sure, but I will verify. And so what happens here is, imagine you send out the summing tier here for mixing, like the strings high long, and you get feedback. They need to separate the high strings there because something is whatever needs to be mixed differently. Then instead of the high long strings, you could separate that out into library 1 violins, so you could send these individually. That's what this is for. And then for final delivery, usually what you would want to use is the stems, and that breaks down to the same groups as we have in the VEPro and in the Quickload. Strings, brass, woodwinds, keys, synth, guitars, ethnic, bass, vocals, percussion, tonal percussion, drums, sound effects, and sound effects tonal. One thing that I haven't spoken about at all is why the Quickload portion of it as well. So the thing is, once you have cultivated your template and you're fine and happy with what you have going with your VEPro template, like you have your strings, your brass, your woodwinds, and your percussion that you tend to utilize oftentimes in your work, you still might want to use additional instruments that are not part of the VEPro frame. And this is simply where the Quickload instances come into play. So say you want to use a string instrument, like let's do ensemble here, that is not part of the template. You can then activate the Quickload portion, these Quickload instruments, and these are, as you can see here, these are now opened up in Cubase directly. So it's like a combination of both. You have the fixed frame in Vienna that you always tend to work with, and then, for example, we could go quickly here, strings. Say I want to use Oliver Arnold's Evolution, some stuff that is not part of the template. So I can load that in a contact instance here in Cubase and utilize it from here. So that's what the VEPro portion is for. The Quickload portion is for. Another very important thing that I haven't talked about, the template comes set up for all the instances loaded as contact instances, but you can very easily swap the instruments if you want to use Spitfire or a sine or any other instrument. Let's quickly do that as an example in the woodwinds. Say I have the flute, but I actually want to use a flute from Metropolis Arc that I happen to have in sine. And let's say I want to have a short articulation. So this is channel 3 on port 2. What I have to do for this is I click on the contact here on these two up and down arrows and change the instrument to, in this case, to orchestral tools. So now I have the sine player here and can go to my instruments. And since we are on flutes short, I want to have some short flutes. I go to my flutes here and load the staccato patch. The only thing that I need to keep in mind if I change the instrument is I need to match the MIDI channel here. This is MIDI channel 3, so I need to change this to MIDI channel 3. So now I have sine in my template instead of contact. I can go to my flutes, VEPro woodwinds, my first woodwind library, go to the flute shorts. And immediately have something else than contact in the template. Same with a flute legato. If I need sine again, let's take this as an example. Change that. Here I luckily don't need to change the MIDI channel because we are on 1 already. Go to my orchestra, flutes, and load the legato patch. Done. Again, in Cubase, we can see that it comes back through its dedicated Library 1 flutes channel. Showcasing that once more, when later I want to rename the tracks to make sure I know what library that actually is. If you stick to one library, you can just name the folder, or you can utilize the naming tool. I'm showing that again in case you missed that in the beginning. Let's say the flutes are Metropolis Arc 2. So I select all these channels, go to Project Logical Editor, and I have it already loaded, but on the naming, I created a rename search string preset. And what I want to do is I want to rename G into G Mate Arc 2 and hit apply. And immediately all my channels are aptly named. I forgot the first channel. So that works. Now it's sine. And I should copy that over to this one. So we have that here as well. All right. Then, last but not least, I mentioned the visibility function already. Let's, just for the sake of getting it done, load an orchestral patch. For example, let's load a snare. Let's take Symphony Series percussion, drums, and let's load a snare here. This is channel 1 already. It could have taken any other channel. Go to my orchestral percussion, separate it, orchestral, tonal, and epic percussion. Go to my snare one. Works. And in the Quickload section, all the routings are in place for VEPro as well as for the Quickload section. And last but not least, we have the aux portion. For example, if you have a piano that you always seem to work with, there's no need to have that setting in Cubase. I don't know, do I have Noir? Yeah, I do have that installed on my slave. So I could, for example, have my Noir piano in the VEPro frame. Go to my piano. And again, audio sends are preset up, going to keys reverb, a little delay, maybe a little bit of black hole. Also, these send effects that are set up, this template uses Valhalla Vintage Verb, Valhalla Delay, and Black Hole, but obviously, in case you don't have some of these plugins, you can go into your effects channels and replace them with whatever plugins you like to utilize for reverb, delay, black hole, etc. So if you don't have them, you will get an error message in the beginning, and then you can just go to the effects channels and change them to whatever plugins you prefer to work with. Well, does the individual return increase the processing overhead? I don't see much of a difference. So the processor load in Cubase right now is on half because I have all the instances of virtual mix rack on all the individual returns. So when we just look at, let's take off the group tracks here and just open up the instruments. So in the VST instrument returns, we have pretty much the same amount of returns as MIDI channels. And I don't see much of an overload. It's just the amount of... I have another template where I use way more returns, and I didn't activate all of them. So, for example, on the auxiliary, I only have like 50 channels activated. Thanks, Daniela. Much appreciated. And again, the idea behind this whole thing is that you invest some time to sit down to cultivate the VEPro instances with your instruments that you tend to use the most. You can technically load 2 full string libraries, ensemble libraries, solo, same with brass and woodwinds. You could say I do have some choir patches that I always use, like for example, performance samples Oceania or something is something that I regularly use and don't even think about loading it up because it's always sitting there ready to go. So this is something that if you happen to have that, you could do that, go into the instruments and load. In this case, it might be even useful to get rid of this and load the full section, the multi, men and women. So that's done. So now on the choir channel here, do have Oceania. And the idea is to cultivate, let's say, Cinematic Studio Strings, Cinematic Studio Brass, if you happen to have that. And you could leave the second library open, unused for now, because you really have to keep in mind how much power you have available with your slave systems. And again, like we mentioned before, there's also a way to separate the workload. You don't have to have all these 5 instances in the same VEPro frame. And so I could technically, if I don't have enough juice on my slave system, I could, for example, let's do this. Let's say I get rid of the percussion instance here, disconnect. And on my slave, I get rid of the percussion instance. So let's say I have just loaded these 4 on my slave. I could open a local instance of VEPro. Just opening that up here. It's loading. Okay, so this is now VEPro sitting on the same system as my Cubase. So I can create an instance, open a project. I don't want to save this, and I need to go here. Quickly take that off screen in case I show something that I don't want to show. CTO shop, templates, CTO, Quickload, and VEPro. So then I have in the VEPro folder, I do have the individual instances. I can say, okay, I want to load just the percussion here. So now I have 4 of these instances on my slave, and 1 is here sitting on my master system. So I go back to Cubase. I obviously need to reconnect this instance. So I say connect, and now I see this untitled one here. Should name that to VP Perk. Not perf. Perk. Okay, so now I have 4 instances on my slave and 1 here on my master system, and we had this snare loaded on this system. Let's do that again. Drums, snare 1. So now I'm back with a snare here. So now I'm addressing this instrument. Spec of my slave. This is a Ryzen 1950X processor with 128 gigs of RAM. There we go. So 1950X 16 core at 4.10 gigahertz with 128 gigs of RAM. And we look, by the way, this we just loaded a few instruments right now. The RAM load is sitting at close to 23. I think the empty one with no instruments loaded takes around 11 gigabytes with all 5 instances. Just so you know. All right. That's quite a lot to cover on this one. Sorry for the long explanations here. But I want to go back and reconnect my percussion here on the slave instead of my main system. Again, like I said, it is absolutely possible to run VEPro and Cubase on the same system, but I highly recommend to separate this into. So a slave is really helpful in that setup. The main idea behind this is I just got a lot of feedback from people that are struggling with setting up VEPro and all the routings and connections, and this is really your starting point to get going and understand the inner workings of a VEPro driven template. One thing I want to mention, once you're done with filling up your sounds and everything, you may, especially for example in the percussion bus, you may run into the fact that you want to add more instruments because it's not enough. That can easily happen with percussion. Right now you can see I have filled it to port 13, channel 3, and first 80 audio returns. And if we look at the Cubase setting here in the outputs for the, oh, by the way, I need to reconnect that to the slave. There we go. So now I can close my local VEPro. Don't need that anymore. Thank you. Bye-bye. So now we don't have a snare anymore because I reloaded the instance. So I have to reload that. And then I will go into how to add instruments to that. All right, so let's say I want to add more instruments here. I'm missing something. Like I said, we are ending on 13.3 and the audio return is 80 something. It was 81. So in Cubase, you can see that I only have for now activated the returns that are actually utilized by the instruments we have. So here, I think I just found another mistake. The outputs don't line up. Again, going to be fixed. First epic percussion is 47. What did I miss? percussion, the first one, actually 53 and not 47. Okay, I'm going to fix that. But what I wanted to say, if you want to add more outputs, you have to activate these outputs in Cubase. And then you can add instruments in the frame. So the easiest way to do that is to take the last entry and just hit Control D or right click duplicate. Then you have a new instrument. Let's say we do that on channel 14, 1. And then we need to set the audio return. Let's say this is coming back through 91. And we add some hand zimmer percussion, whatever. I don't really care. Just load something up. Scammy, right. Cubase 12 is around the corner, but I mean, this is something we have to see once it's there. So if that is easier to work with on bigger systems. So we created a new channel. And here we see the last one that we had is 13.3. So I'm going to hit Command D, duplicate that channel as well. Set this to 14.1. That gives us the MIDI channel we just had here. Obviously, this needs to be 1. Sorry. Okay, this is coming back through 91. And we need to tell him here that this is 91 as the return. And we see the audio signals there. And yeah, the only downside is when you create new channels, you need to take care of the routing. So if you need more, you need to look into the routing. So this is like a mid percussion. So I am going to send this to Epic Percussion mid. And then the routing from there is automatically done. So it will end up in the percussion stem now. We look at here at the stems. You can see that it's coming out through the percussion now. So this is how you can add additional channels. But for the majority of utilizations, it should be enough with the channels that you have at hand already. And again, if there are instruments that are not covered in the VEPro frame, this is what the Quickload portion of the template is for. So if you say, okay, I don't have sub percussions in my VEPro frame, but I need a sub just locally here on this project that I'm working on, then I'm just taking something, for example, so here, tools, arc, percussion effects, small mellower, boomer effects. There we go. So I just need these. Take this. Okay, so just want to use this as my sub, and this is just for the track. Other tracks that use the same template don't need that sound, so I have it locally just for the project, and it will be safe just within the project. I just realized that there's a lot of and a few bugs that I found that I'm going to fix right away. Scammy, this breaks down into stems already, so let me just add these booms here on the track. So and let's add the flute for the sake of having a few groups going. We need, let's do this flute with a little bit of delay. Okay, so let's put some flute on there on top. So now we have the flute in there as well. Then let's expand the end there. There's a lot of tail. And okay, let's show how the template works in terms of exporting. On my end, it's just the E button. So if I do a single export, it will export the stereo out, which is the master. Flosy, yeah, Studio One is coming soon as well. Hey Mojo, thanks for being around. But yeah, Cubase has phenomenal multiple export features. So when we select multiple, we can go into, there's a lot of groups set up already. And to filter that, the easiest way is to say, when I access the stems, is just to put an underscore. So now we see these first tracks here, these are the stems. And we utilize, so let's take off everything here. So we utilize the strings, the brass, the woodwinds, the percussion. Was anything else? Did I do a piano note? I didn't. Let's put a piano note on top there as well. Wonderful. So, sorry. So we have a piano in there as well. So I take the keys. These are the stems. And they will be aptly named, hopefully. Let's do a wave export, 48. And I want to use the audio folder from the project. Test. They will automatically named with a stem name in the file name. And let me render this and bring it back into the project. So there we go. And then just export the audio. That may take a quite little moment, so we can quickly switch screen and talk a little bit about. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat or in the comments below the video. I'm probably going to leave that up on YouTube. And this is not the easiest product. I'll be aware of that because it's just a lot to be done. And so as you can see, now we have the individual stems from the track rendered out. So we have the strings. We have the strings, the brass, the woodwinds, and the keys and the percussion. Quickly right out of the template. So if I say I just need the brass, the strings, then I can just mute the rest. There's a few crackling errors in there. This is just because of my streaming at the same time and the streaming between the systems. Shouldn't happen, but happens. Anyway, this is how you can immediately render out the stems. And everything else is explained in the manual, of course. Yes, Cami, that's the idea of just having, not only having a lot of libraries, but also having a frame that you don't need to have all the instruments hosted inside Cubase. So VEPro is a godsend to have your instruments hosted outside of Cubase to free up some wiggle room in the CPU usage of Cubase. And Studio One handles that equally well, meanwhile. They added a bunch of stuff that that works well with larger templates now, especially with the visibility options. So the Studio One version for the same template is coming very, very soon to the shop as well. I'm in the process of setting that up already, but like I mentioned, I found just a few little bugs and tiny annoyances that I need to fix for this template. In case you bought it already, you will get an updated version very, very soon. I'm going to keep working on that, but overall, it should give you an idea of how to set up a bigger template with VEPro. It's kind of a little tough to make that just accessible for everyone. It really, because so much depends on your personal configuration at home. But you really have to see that at the starting point. If you struggle with setting up your templates with VEPro, I think that this is the way to get going and dig deep into it and then customize it to your own needs and to your own workflow. With that said, that shall conclude this little showcase of the template. We will talk about more about that in the coming videos, and once the Studio One version is ready, I will do a video for that as well. So, Denzel, congratulations, you made it to your first live. All right, Graymith, thanks so much. And yeah, I will be live on Tuesday next week, taking a look at Orchestral Tools E. Gudesman solo violin with a giveaway as well. And a few upcoming streams. There will be Stress of Darbuka Extreme, the Ben Osterhaus new cello. This thing is awesome. Have you seen that? Let me quickly show it to you. This thing is gorgeous. The Pathfinder cello. He just released it. Let me load that up. This is amazing. It's a very interesting concept. Well, CPU is going through the roof right now. Sorry for that. Yeah, we'll have to take a deeper look at that without the CPU restraints I'm running into right now. Anyway, thanks for joining in tonight. You all have a wonderful evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are. And I see you very, very soon. Okay, Reaper users feel left out. I'm sorry. Maybe I will look into Reaper one day. I know that it has the capabilities to do a lot of the same stuff, so it might be very useful to look into that. For now, thanks so much. See you soon. Bye-bye.